Environment. Environment.
Environment. What's that?
Environment.
The environment.
Something related to like natures, maybe like rivers, mountain, beaches, fish.
Okay.
It's our habitat.
Wait, I'll ask my mom. As far as I'm concerned, environment is everything that surround me that related to the nature, tiger, elephant, tree.
I already know what you meant.
According to Environmental Protection Act (EPA) 1997, iceberg, polar bear. Environment means the interaction and the interrelationship among the components of natural, cultural, and social systems. Every year, it gets worse and worse.
Youth.
You.
Youth.
Youth,
Youth.
youth, youth,
Youth.
youth,
Youth.
youth,
Youth.
youth.
You.
Hello everyone, Assalamualaikum. Hello, Assalamualaikum everyone. Can you hear me, Aidil?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, welcome back to another session of Enviro-Talk with another interesting topic brought to you by one and only YELO 2020. So I'm very excited today. I'm your moderator Shahira because we have a very special guest with us today, which is Aidil Iman, or better known as Sunflower Aidil on social media. Say hi to Aidil, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well.
So how are you, Aidil?
I'm doing great. I'm currently at Johor Bahru with my family.
Oh, okay. A vacation.
Yeah, so right now everyone's sleeping, so this is a perfect opportunity for me to be alone. Yeah.
Okay, great. So a brief background on Aidil. So Aidil is an environmental activist who has been actively advocating for environmental conservation, climate action, and also social justice on social media, making him the perfect speaker for today's session. So Aidil, do you mind to share more about yourself so that we can get to know you better?
Well, I would love to extend my greatest gratitude and thank you to the YELO Project and UNIZA for giving me this opportunity to be involved to speak to young Malaysians about climate change, environmental problems, and so on. I'm currently 21 years old. I just graduated from Segi University from my diploma in communications. Right now, I am attached to My Hutan, which is a movement powered by Undi 18 that focuses on forest conservation in Malaysia through sustainable financing. So that's a brief introduction about myself.
Wow, very impressive. We are very honored to have you with us today. So without further ado, let's continue with our topic for today, which is youth and environment. So my first question for you is, Aidil, we all are aware of the climate change that is happening right now, but how exactly is the climate change? affecting human and also animals?
Well, I think when we think about climate change, a lot of people think that environmental problems only affect the environment. And
Mm-mm.
but the thing is, every single environmental issue affects human rights. So when it comes
Mm-mm.
to human lives, we're talking about how climate change affects our access to food security. It is projected that if the world goes to a 1.5 degrees Celsius, 30% of Malaysia's rice production will drop. So this is a big problem because rice is our staple food. It's our favorite food to have on the
Yeah.
plate. So when climate change happens, it prevents our access. It prevents the right to food. It prevents the right to adequate housing. If we're seeing cases of floods in Penang and Kelantan and so on, uh, it also affects women as well. Climate change has a disproportionate effects on women. We're seeing in countries like Uganda, where two rural communities in a wetland region, they are exposed to gender-based violence because of climate change.
Mm.
Families in Uganda are selling off their daughters to marriages because they feel like it's better to sell off their daughters to better cope with food scarcity. And we know that food scarcity is a direct cause from climate change as well. In terms of animals, we're seeing like these videos and images of polar bears losing their habitats.
Mm-mm.
But in Malaysia itself, we are seeing in cases of like migration from hornbills because it's too hot here. We are seeing rapid increase of deforestation, which leads to climate change and leads to habitat loss. So basically what we need to find the connection is to see how climate change is impacting human rights as well as the livelihoods and survival of many, many species on this planet.
Okay, so right. As what you said just now, we can know that climate change does not only affect the plants, the environment, but also human rights and animals as well. So my next question for you is, how does meat or food production, just like you mentioned just now, contribute to the climate change?
The factors of climate change are varied. There is electrical generation, transportation, and then there is livestock. So we know that livestock comes from like cows, or goats, or basically any animals involved within to produce food, to produce meat for us. Um, I think the contribution that livestock places in climate change is around 18%, 18%. So this is still a big number and still a pressing issue because based on the reports by the IPCC, the way that we're managing our land is messing up with the planet. It's not good for the planet. The way that how we manage basically our land. So because we are cutting down trees to make way for plantations. We are cutting down trees to make way for cattle or livestock. And you can see this in countries like Brazil, where cattle ranches exist throughout the nation, where they cut down forests just to make room for more cows. And we do know that the production of meat or the process of getting meat is a leading factor in climate change because of the methane released by those animals in livestock. And methane is more potent than carbon dioxide. So this is basically how it interlinks with climate change. And we are also seeing injustice and as well as cases of horrendous murder related to cattle ranching in Brazil. A lot of activists have died, environmentalists have been murdered by cattle ranchers because they have been voicing about issues that have been related to deforestation. So the IPCC report notes that the way we're managing our land, the way that we're using our land is not good for the planet because we're just cutting down more trees just to make room for palm oil, to make room for more cows in countries like Brazil, to make room for unnecessary and unsustainable development. So basically, you can see the relationship of how livestock is a result from deforestation and then leading to climate change.
Okay, so as you mentioned just now, we do know now that the food production or meat production does have effects on the climate change. So, in your opinion, do we need to eat less meat or anything to help the planet and environment? Is it necessary for that?
Well, based on the UN report, it is more viable if everyone chooses to have a plant-based diet. There is a lot of this idea that plant-based food is quite expensive, but Chinese people have proven otherwise because a lot of their dishes are plant-based. A lot of their cuisine can be vegetarian or vegan. But is it viable? Is it the ultimate step to combat climate change? I think not, because the most critical element of combating climate change is to reduce greenhouse gases and reducing our dependency on fossil fuels. I think that's very important, but I think personal action is important as well. Individual choice is important, meaning that once a week you can avoid eating meat, substitute it to another source of protein. I based on a National Geographic article that I read last year, chicken has less carbon footprint than meat. So so it's better to eat chicken than meat because they have less carbon footprint. But at the same time, we have to be critical on how governments need to move on to renewable energy rather than just being dependent on fossil fuels.
Okay, so you're saying that instead of focusing on not eating meat, we should instead focus on how to reduce the greenhouse gases. That would
Yes.
make it better for the environment.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so in your opinion, Aidil, as a Malaysian youth, are Malaysians well aware of the climate change and the pollutions, in your opinion?
Well, I think there is a relevant study, case study, or basically like a project that United Nations Development Program did, UNDP did, and they conducted a survey for youth in Malaysia, and 92% of youth in Malaysia are worried about climate change. So that's a lot of people. We are aware of it. We are very aware that something is happening to the planet. We are aware of deforestation, pollution. It makes us angry, but we are not aware about how systems and laws are not being good enough. How there is corruption, how there is a lack of transparency, and how these companies that are polluting the environment are not being fined enough, not being thrown into jail, being fined like below 100,000 ringgit. I think we need to improve that kind of awareness to get direct action from the government. And I think education on climate change in Malaysia needs to be upgraded, because the only thing that we learned about climate change was in geography, I think, and it was very very basic. It was very it wasn't it wasn't improved on the standards of other countries. For example, like we aren't taught about rising sea levels. We aren't taught about how people are losing their homes because of climate change. We are just taught about how greenhouse gases is causing climate change and nothing more. So I think that needs to be improved.
Okay, so in your opinion, we Malaysians youth are well aware of these happenings. But how about those who are still not aware of these happenings? How to make them aware of it, and how to gain older generations' attention to make them come together and try to save our Earth?
I think inclusivity is very important. So when we want everyone to know about climate change, we have to let everyone know how it affects them individually, or how it affects their groups when it comes to the causes, when it comes to the effects of climate change. We do know that climate change impacts poor people the most: women, indigenous groups, persons with disabilities, migrants, and many, many financially disadvantaged groups. So to create an inclusive platform is important when everyone knows that this is how I'm being affected by climate change. But at the same time, you're telling them this is how you can help to combat climate change. we have to find a relationship between climate change and certain groups, and how they can not only be affected, but how they can also help contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, participating in conservation for nature, leading policy making, making decisions. So basically, a platform that is not just youth-led or youth-centric, but inclusive to every single person on this planet, because we're all affected in different ways. So what if we give them solutions that are responsive to their problems? For example, like gender responsive solutions. When we give women gender responsive solution, it gives them opportunities, it gives them resources, it gives them the opportunity to lead and participate. So I think we need to create that kind of diverse, inclusive platform. And for older generations, it's always good to talk to them when it comes to your family. It's good to participate in conversations with them. It's good to know that, it's good to also let them know that their generation have messed up when it comes to climate change. So I think because, even though the youth only represent a small percentage, they are in fact the future. And I think that's the point that you need to deliver to older generations, because this is the future. We do not own the earth. We only inherit it to our future generations.
Yes, an inclusive platform for all generations should be great. So, Ideal, we are all aware of governments and NGOs' efforts, such as the Go Green campaign and the Earth Hour campaign to save the earth, to save the environment. But does turning off the lights during the Earth Hour really helps with anything? Does it make any changes?
Well, I think the first Earth Hour was in 2007 or 2006 by WWF Australia. It was an important movement because there is global solidarity, there is international recognition, and everyone is participating. I believe it's from just 8:30 till 9:30 p.m. You close your lights for one day. Everyone has to participate, like regardless, like governments, companies, they all have to turn off their lights. Is it a strong action to combat climate change? No, it's not. It's not strong enough to combat climate change, because we know that 71% of industrial greenhouse gas emissions are caused only by 100 companies. Only 100 companies are responsible for 71% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions based on industries. And so this is like, I commend the effort, because it shows that people are in solidarity, people are internationally involved, and people want to raise awareness. But we also need to hold these companies accountable, I think.
So it is a great effort to show that people care about the earth, but it doesn't really make any changes. Okay,
yeah,
get it. Okay, so Ideal, as you said, a lot of Malaysians, we are aware of these happenings of the climate change, but some of us, we have the mindset of kalau aku seorang je yang buat, ada beza ke, ada function ke to the earth? So how to overcome this kind of mindset?
Well, I think that is a problem that a lot of environmentalists, especially young environmentalists, are facing. They have like this issue with themselves, that feeling that what they do is not strong enough because what they're doing is just individual action. I personally have faced that as well. I feel like sometimes that what I'm doing is just too small, doesn't directly impact to bigger things. But what I discovered along the way is that I can join NGOs. I can participate with young Malaysians who have the same ideas, the same vision, the same passion as me. So I think when you feel that way, you need to find support within your group. You need to network with other conservationists, other activists, other people who are passionate about saving the earth. I think that's collective movement is very, very empowering and very, very important. And I think no one is too small to make big changes. We are looking at people like Greta Thunberg, who's only like I think 18 or 17 years old, who's making a huge difference in the world. And she's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize and won the Children Peace Prize and many things, and has spoken at the United Nations. And along her side, and she's not doing it alone. She's doing it with girls like Autumn Peltier, Zie Bastida, and other young activists from around the world. She's not doing it alone. And I think that's how we can transform that feeling of, like, kalau I buat je, tak guna pun, like channel that energy into a collective movement. You can just, can chat with me personally, you can chat with your friends, or you can find groups like Malaysian Youth Delegation, Undi 18, WWF, just do that. I think that's very important. So you can find a support group and make friends. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that you shouldn't think that you are alone in this movement. There are a lot of other youth or other people out there that has the same idea as you. So Aidil, we can see that there are some people that who purposely damage the environment and proudly posting that on social media such as Twitter or YouTube. And for this kind of people, do we have a specific law for this kind of people, or is there need to be a new law enforced for them?
Well, yes, there are many laws regarding environment, wildlife, and so on. I think just this month, I think the video went viral on April. It was a man who I think shot a monkey, and and tortured it, and he was fined, I think 9,000 Malaysian ringgit this month, and that was done under the Wildlife Conservation Act. And a lot of so the thing is, these laws do exist to punish people who pollute the environment or abuse wildlife or abuse animals. They do exist, but do they need to be improved and enforced well enough? Yes. We are not seeing, for example, like the Environmental Quality Act is not strong enough, because I think the maximum is only 100,000 ringgit for the recent case in the water disruptions in Selangor happening. They are fined less than 100,000. They are fined for like 90,000. That's not enough, because those companies are super rich, and they can. And I think this is a very, very, very important quote, or a very important note to be said, is that when punishment for polluting the environment is only monetary, it's not a punishment. It's just a surcharge to these rich people, because they can pay for it. They can pay for damaging the environment. So how do we? It. Yes, exactly. So how do we punish them at a more like important scale? Is to, of course, improve laws, and maybe make the fines much higher, maybe even have them pay the rehabilitation process for the environment. Make them involved in community service, and and for God's sake, spend jail time. None of them have been in jail for polluting the environment. And these people are CEOs and managers, and the victims are always those who are earning less than them. So I think we really, really need to restructure how we see enforcement for environmental pollution, environmental crimes, wildlife crimes. I think that's very, very crucial.
Yeah, I also think that it's very crucial for us to improve the law on the wildlife conservation. So, Aidil, we are currently still in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic, a world pandemic. So, does the COVID-19 pandemic actually help in the environment to recuperate, since the border was closed and traveling was restricted and there are less visitors in each country? Does this outbreak really change anything? Is it good for the environment?
there has been some benefits in Malaysia, if we're seeing. I think during the first MCO that we had, that was in March until June, or I'm not sure. I don't remember anymore. Uh, and turtle landings in Terengganu have increased up to 3,000 plus, 3,000
Oh.
turtle landings in Terengganu because the beaches were uninterrupted. Because no one was going to the beaches anymore. So, turtles have like this is a perfect moment for me to land on those beaches. So, and I think wildlife crimes dropped by 73% during MCO, dropped by 73% because, borders are being closed. No one can enter our forests anymore. Everyone's feeling afraid to go anywhere during the MCO. So poachers don't go into our forests during MCO. There was a significant 73% drop of wildlife crimes. And I think City, which is a organization, I think they released a quite interesting data on how pollution from cars have dropped as well, because no one was going out. No one was driving anywhere. But we are also seeing negative effects of the MCO to the environment. The most pivotal or the most devastating effect is that ecotourism is down. Village people, boatmen, chalet owners, those involved in forest tourism in like Taman Negara, who rely on carrying boats for the tourists, have lost their income, because of the MCO. And we are seeing NGOs, for example, like Gibbon Conservation Society, do not have enough funding to take care of the gibbons that they have been rescued and are rehabilitating. They are losing their funding to to buy those gibbons food and supplies. So NGOs are losing money, and they're not being given enough funding for conservation efforts. So there are pros and cons when it comes to this. And I think there was a recent data release of how there was like less than 6% of carbon emissions drop during the pandemic. So I think, so these things do happen. But, in an ideal world, we do not need a pandemic to save the environment, of course. So what the pandemic shows to us is that it is possible for humans to perhaps leave the beach alone for a while, perhaps have a carless day,
leave the turtles alone.
Yeah, perhaps use public transportation. So the pandemic is showing that humans can do these steps and commit to these solutions without the need of a pandemic. So
So we can see now that there are ways, there are a lot of ways actually for us humans to help conserve the earth. So the last question from us for you, Aidil. As an environmental activist, do you have any advice for people out there, to youth out there who wants to also become an environmental activist? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, sure. I think the first one is to participate. Participation is important. And that is when you go to Twitter and you look for NGOs like Malaysian Youth Delegation, WWF, Malaysian Nature Society, Undi 18, and you choose which NGO you want to be a part of. Because, there are so many organizations here in Malaysia that focuses on nature. All you have to do is choose. If you feel like, you need to, you feel like nature is so English centric, only using English, you want to have accessibility in Bahasa Melayu to everyone in Malaysia, you can join organizations like Kuasa Perak. If you feel like you need to be in policy making, you feel like, I need to be in like policy making for climate change, you join Malaysian Youth Delegation. If you want to talk to politicians and be politically engaged in with governments, you can work together with Undi 18 on these matters. So so basically what I'm saying is that the platform is so diverse. And another tip is that just because you don't see conservation of nature as something that is only science based. Everyone can participate, meaning that if you are if you are a law graduate, you can become an environmental lawyer. If you are a student in journalism, you can be an environmental journalist. If you are a English uh, graduate, you can be a teacher that teaches about the environment to their students. So I think it's important where we find platforms for everyone. It's not just that climate change is just solely for students who are studying science. It's for everyone to be involved. And I think the last thing that I would like to say is a quote from one of my favorite activists in the world, Zé Bastida, who said that when we create a relationship with nature rather than ownership, that is when we create something that is sacred.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as you were saying, there are a lot of platforms. We just need to show some efforts to be part of the environment.
Yeah.
So that's the end of our question. So we're going to move on to the questions from the audience. So are you ready, Aidil?
Yes, sure. Boleh.
So the first question is from Sahira. How do we convince people that climate change is a serious issue? Some tend to not believe the issue and resulting to disregard the issue.
I think the people who are denying climate change, I think they are the people who are putting more pockets into the companies of fossil fuels. That is something that they're not realizing, because they're doing what fossil fuel companies are wanting people to do, which is not talk about climate change. Meaning that oil and gas companies are saying that climate change is not our fault. So you're doing a good job at it if you deny climate change. So I think that's I think it's important to let them know that if they are denying climate change, the only benefit that they're doing is that they're putting more money into the pockets of fossil fuel companies. And I think also another great way is to what I've said earlier is the relationship between nature and people. So when you say to a person so this is climate change causing erratic weather patterns, more storms, more floods, more droughts, more failed food production, more loss of biodiversity. How does those affect them individually?
Mm-hmm.
So you can explain them to them. I think when water disruptions happen, that's an environmental problem caused from river pollution. So when a river pollution happens, it causes water disruption and it affects our access to water. So I think we need to start telling people that nature is an important resource. We are dependent on it.
Oh, okay. So the next question from Lailan Safina. It's from Facebook. Renewable energy is known to minimize carbon pollution and lower impact to climate change. So is Malaysia suitable to develop renewable energy?
Yes, I think during the past government under Pakatan Harapan, Yeo Bien, the Minister of Mestek, which is under her division is climate change, she did make some commitments on how to go to renewable energy by 20%. I think right now our numbers are as low as 2%, or I'm not so sure, but it's a very low dependency on renewable energy. So we can decarbonize industries in Malaysia and focus on renewable energy. It is possible. It is possible for companies and governments to smoothly transition towards renewable energy and make sure that everyone within the energy industry is treated fairly and is, because it's a big transition, because, if someone from oil tiba-tiba nak pergi ke to go to renewable energy. It's a big transition because oil and gas and renewable energy are two different things. So how can governments or companies create a smooth transition for this worker from an oil and gas company to a renewable energy? I think that's an important step that that we need to address first. But it is possible for us to do that.
I think little steps by the government and companies would suffice, right?
Yes, I think not really little. I think they need to do big steps with the resources that
Oh,
they
okay.
have. Yeah, for sure. That I think companies like Shell, Exxon, I think they can and have the financial allocations needed to move towards renewable energy. So yeah.
So another question. Someone would like to know regarding your view, Aidil, on the haze problem that we face almost every year since 2005. Is there anything that the government can do in order to solve the problem, the haze issue?
Well, to our disappointment, the
Mm,
Ministry of Environment and Water actually rejected the Transboundary Haze Pollution Act. So that was an act, a law enforcement that was brought up by, I think, Yeo Yin, wanted to pass it, but then the new government happened, and the current government is saying no to the act. And the Transboundary
mm,
Haze Pollution Act is a very important law enforcement in Malaysia to enforce, responsibility to enforce, sustainable management of of how we see this haze problem is. So it's quite sad that Malaysia has rejected that plan, has abandoned that plan. So that is actually an important step that they need to readdress and perhaps look into it more and more, because organizations like Greenpeace, Climate Action are saying that the Haze Transboundary Pollution Act is an important law in Malaysia to combat the haze problem. And we do know that the haze problem is a direct cause from unsustainable practices of palm oil, in our neighboring countries. There have been, there are methods like slash and burn recorded in, I think in Indonesia. Even in Malaysia, there are some cases of unsustainable practices of palm oil, and they are burning land to make way for new palm oil, and those burning lands lead to haze. So I think other than the law enforcement that the Transboundary Haze Pollution Act was supposed to do, another important step is to make sure that every form of plantation, whether it's soil, whether it's soy or palm oil, they need to be certified by a sustainability body and have good, sustainable, and responsible practices.
So, okay, very, very good explanation from you, Aidil. Um, a quiet personal question here. What inspired you to become an environmentalist?
Okay, so I think I started it 2 years ago, and I've
Mhm.
realized that what I buy a lot of clothes from H&M and Uniqlo and Topshop back then, and I've
Fast fashion.
realized, yeah, fast fashion, and I've realized that these brands are, most of the clothes are made from synthetic fibers, or basically like polyester, nylon, and they are plastics. And when you wash them in your washing machine, those clothes actually shed microplastics. And
Oh,
so when they go into our longkang drain, everything eventually
mm-mm.
it goes into our rivers, and from our rivers it goes into our oceans. So those microplastics are making their way to the ocean and being ingested by fish. And who eats fish? Humans. So
Us.
we are, yeah, so we eat. And it is discovered, I think, just last month, or this month, I think a few weeks ago, the Guardian posted a new study, an article on a study that the placenta of an unborn baby now has microplastics.
Oh, wow.
We have microplastic in our bodies. It also has been discovered in human feces. In our poop,
Mm.
there is microplastic as well. There are microplastics in the air as well, in the air we breathe, in the fish we eat, in the bottle drinks that we drink from.
Mm.
So fast fashion is definitely a contributor to this. and also, fast fashion is leading to human rights violations because they're not paying, they're not paying their
Workers
workers.
enough.
Yeah. So I think I've realized that, my actions weren't sustainable and they weren't good. And I've decided that I wanted to make a difference. And from that on, I've become inspired to try my best to make a difference. And I think when it comes to what that is, it's what inspired me and who I think for right now I'm inspired by women like Zia Bastida, who is an activist in the United States fighting climate change, and very own in Malaysia, our very own one, a very bright and passionate young woman. Her name is Jasmine Irisha, and she works for UNICEF Malaysia, and she's a consultant for environment and climate, and she's amazing. I think everyone needs to look into her work.
Oh, okay. So Aidil, you mentioned about fast fashion right now. I am very interested on that topic.
Yeah.
Do you have any, suggestions on how we can, instead of opting for fast fashion, what can we do to help the environment in terms of fashion?
Well, thrift shopping, pergi kedai bundle is great. It's sustainable shopping. It's because, thrift shopping is a great alternative than fast fashion, and it's much cheaper. So basically another is, of course, secondhand clothes, that is it, and, sometimes you just need to realize that, do I need that shirt? If I have another one at home that I haven't worn in 2 years. So you need to, balance out what you need and what you want. At the same time, if you are looking for clothes that are, more sustainable, the cheapest one is, of course, pergi kedai bundle and thrift shopping. Another thing that you can do, if you have the privilege, if you have the financial resources, is to support local brands in Malaysia, local sustainable brands. There are many of them in Malaysia. I think I did tweet about them, but I forgot what those brands are. But they do exist in Malaysia that that are sustainably sourced and sustainably produced. But they are quite expensive. So I think if you want a cheaper alternative, thrift shopping is the solution.
Okay. So by thrifting we can save the environment and also save our money as well, okay? So
Yes.
I think it's a great alternative. So my next question for you is, this one is about Haze as well. His problem seems an annual nuisance. Environmental ministers and officials meet every year to discuss about the problem. Do you think this is one of the environmental racism, and how to tackle this? Oh wow.
This is regarding the Haze problem. Environmental racism does exist. So I'm not so sure in the context of Malaysia, but we are seeing environmental racism in countries like United States, where Black people and the Latinos are more impacted by environmental degradation. Usually, the poor settlements of communities are situated near polluting factories. A lot of poor people are placed within communities that are near toxic waste and so on. So, but these are examples I see and I've read from the United States. I am not so sure about the context of Malaysia and the Haze problem. I'm sorry that I cannot answer that so fully. My apologies.
Oh, never mind. I think the audience that asked this question would understand. So my next question, there are a lot of questions today.
No worry.
A lot of people are interested in this topic. How to tackle the illegal trade of endangered species, especially in Malaysia? Does the law in Malaysia provide adequate sentences against illegal wildlife trader?
I think the past law, I think the last improved law was in 2012, the Wildlife Conservation Act, but it was not, it doesn't involve social media. And we do know that a lot of people are selling wildlife through social media illegally. So we are seeing that. So that is a big problem that we are seeing. And to our greatest achievement, that I think the Wildlife Conservation Act is being reviewed and improved this year. Even though they have said it many times before, every minister have said it many times that we are reviewing it, we are improving it, and so on and so on. But I think they are amending it to like very higher sentences. They are involving social media within the acts, because social media was not a part of the previous 2012 act, and now people are selling more wildlife through Telegram, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So they want to involve that in the new amended law. So I think that is being amended, and I'm very happy to hear that. I think the fines go up to 1 million ringgit and so on. I think the maximum of wildlife punishment in Malaysia is right now is 500,000, and I think they want to go up to 1 million or something.
Oh, yeah, great. So I think social media is very crucial nowadays because everyone use social media, and I'm great that they are putting it into consideration, putting it into action. So next question. Next question. Come on, everyone. Questions? Do you have any questions for Aidil? It's not easy to get this opportunity. Okay, from Muhammad Abra, pollution such as sound and carbon emission from developing city is inevitable for the modernization process. How do you see the effort taken by the people itself and government, especially we're on the verge of Industrial Revolution 4.0?
I think Malaysia is a very rich country, and that we are so like on this stuck on the fact that we are a developing nation, but we have made progress. And I think a lot of like the misconception that we have about sustainability is that it's just people, planet, and profit. So what if the profit can be changed into progress? So it is possible for governments and local authorities or people or organizations to sustainably progress in development. Meaning that I refuse to believe that in order for a country to develop, we need to cut down more trees. We need to to emit more carbon emissions. I refuse to believe that we cannot have a better sustainable way, because we do have the resources. Malaysia does have that capacity to sustainably move forward in terms of development. And I think we need to really look into what development means. Does development mean trees cut down for apartments that are called eco apartments? Does development mean that orang asli lands are encroached and disappearing? No. Or what does development mean? I think we really need to look into that. I think the true meaning of sustainable development is when everyone wins and everyone is progressing when it comes to not just to the environment, but also when it comes to their health, when it comes to their education, access to to other resources as well. And I think that's very important. I think rather than sacrificing nature or sacrificing trees to build more buildings, we can work together with nature and create a better sustainable future.
Okay. Next question is, hi Iman. Oh, she says hi to you. What do you
I
think
know
about?
her.
Okay. What do you think about the recent 2021 budget allocated for the environmental considerations? It could positively influence environmental decisions on the basis of SDG.
Well, hi Kazu. She's my sister's friend, I believe.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, I think the budget allocation, a lot of people have criticized it. There are allocations for like, I think for it comes to wildlife conservation, 200 plus ranges and some money allocated to it. But does it tackle, climate change? It doesn't. It doesn't have a specific budget for climate change. So that is the problem that I want to address. And there are many improve ways the budget 2021 could have had for climate action, because a part of the sustainable development goals, or SDGs, is climate action. So we are seeing these vague terms like sustainability bonds, or projects for waste management and so on. Yes, they are great. They are great projects under the Belanjawan 2021. But I think, as a concerned young person in Malaysia, I need a budget allocation specifically for climate change, for research, for reducing dependency on fossil fuels and moving towards renewable energy. I need to see that. I think we all need to see that. They cannot be these things that are just vague and not, that are not precise, and you don't know what they mean. There needs to be a plan that is declared to combat the climate crisis. I think everyone needs to, everyone involved in the government needs to put a place saying that the climate is in a crisis, and we are treating it as a crisis, and allocating a sufficient budget to combat climate change, meaning that how can we improve education within that budget? How can we improve literacy on climate change in that budget? How can we reduce fossil fuel dependency? So I think that's the only thing that I'm so concerned of when it comes to the budget of 2021.
All right. One last question from the audience. Do we have sufficient legislation governing the coastal zone and marine area? Hashtag save the turtles. Yeah, save the turtles.
Well, when it comes to marine protected areas in Malaysia, those areas would be I think, Pulau Perhentian. So those are areas that are protected, no fishing zones and everything. Can they be improved? And can they be improved? Yes. Are they sufficient right now? The ones that we have now? No, sadly, because Malaysia is having problems from, illegal fishing boats coming in. There are problems of overfishing fish. If I'm not mistaken, Malaysia is the eighth country, the eighth country out of 20 countries that are catching the most sharks and rays. Regardless of people saying that say no to shark fin soup, say no to, we are
Turtle
the number,
eggs.
we are the number 8th country catching the most sharks, and importing it to other countries. So I think we need to revise that kind of law and, have more marine protected areas in Malaysia. And I think it is a great point that, I think his name was Saifullah or something. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
It was
Saifullah,
Saifullah is a great question because I think I watched it in an interview that that a student had with people from Department of Fisheries, and they said that Malaysia doesn't have a really sustainable plan because we're still a developing country. That's such a tiresome excuse. That's such an excuse because we can fish sustainably. We can allow how many boats we go into the water. We can protect more areas in our coastal zones and our seas. I think that's a very, very, very important thing that the Malaysian government and Department of Fisheries can improve on.
All right. So great explanation, Aidil. Thank you so much. With that question, it marks the end of today's session. So before we end completely this session, do you have any last words that you can give to our viewers?
I think that, I would like to say thank you again for having me here. It's been great. I wish you all the best in your studies and your future endeavors. I think the most important thing for us to know is that we can work together with nature if we empower the voices of women, the voices of indigenous communities, the voices of the poor, the voices of migrants, persons with disabilities, and have a collective action to not only work together, but work together with nature rather than against it.
Okay, thank you so much, Aidil. It's such an informative and beneficial session with you today. Thank you. We are very, very honored to have you for our session today. So that's all for today's session, everyone. Don't forget to tune in for our next session. You don't want to miss our next speaker. I can assure you that. And don't forget to subscribe to our social media, YELO 2020. Bye. Bye, Aidil.
Bye. Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care. Be
you.
safe.
You too.